You went on to abuse the corpses of these 3 victims. You stripped them from the waist down. You folded them in half. Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant on counts 1, 4, and 7.
St. John.
This is David St. John, who is facing multiple charges including aggravated sexual assault in Houston, Texas. As per reports, St. John took a girl to a motel and sexually assaulted her at gunpoint. At the time of the incident, St. John was already awaiting trial for 3 other crimes, including possession of the pistol he used during the alleged assault. Now in court, as the judge was seemingly distracted with another issue, St. John did something outrageous.
After you signed the order.
Did you know you left it?
My God. Okay, hit the panic button.
He kept repeating, "Did you learn your lesson?" before punching a man in the face. Fortunately, St. John was quickly subdued by an officer. As he was being cuffed, St. John continued to offer advice.
Sit down, man. Just sit down. I'm learning your lesson. Hey! I'm fine. What was that? No, you need to learn your lesson. You don't end up like me. You suck. No, attitude. Get up. Get up.
It was unclear why St. John attacked the man, but before leaving the courtroom, he had one final word of wisdom.
I did that for your good, son. Don't end up like me.
Fortunately for St. John, the man did not press any charges. However, St. John pled guilty to his original charges and was sentenced to 2 25-year sentences, while David St. John's crazy courtroom behavior certainly shocked everyone. What happens when a convict spits at his lawyer, like in the case of 19-year-old Keontae Hunter, who's accused of murder in Louisville, Kentucky in 2012? Hunter allegedly broke into the home of 21-year-old Jesse Williams and shot him and his girlfriend while they were asleep. Williams died on the spot, while his girlfriend survived. Hunter was arrested and charged with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence. At his pre-trial hearing, the defense attempted to suppress a statement Hunter gave to police after the shooting.
Who was a juvenile at the time. The case law does support, and just our own common sense knows that juveniles have a lowered understanding, a lower intelligence when it comes to legal rights and things of that nature. I would argue that given his situation as a juvenile, that the Commonwealth has not met their burden showing that that was an intelligent and voluntary waiver.
But Hunter had other ideas.
Go ahead, Mr.
Young.
Mr. Hunter, hold on.
First, he disagreed with his public defender. Then, as he was about to be thrown out of court, Hunter exploded.
Dude,
You need to sit down.
I won't do it off my
Sit
case.
down.
I'm standing on all that. It's conflict of interest between me and the client. No, man, I wanna file a verbal motion.
In a fit of rage, Hunter spat on his own lawyer and swung his handcuffed arms at him before being taken down by deputies. But the defiant defendant was not done.
What's up? I'm coming to my next court date, dog. Spit in your face.
Eventually, a new public defender was assigned, but Hunter was ultimately convicted of all charges and sentenced to 25 years in prison. While Keon Hunter proved to be a biological hazard in the courtroom, what happens when a victim's father attacks a convict?
I am struck by the sheer inhumanity of what one human being can do to not one, but 3 human beings.
Like in the case of 39-year-old Michael Madison, who's on trial for multiple murders in Ohio. According to reports, Madison kidnapped and killed 3 women in 2013 before dumping their bodies in plastic bags near his home in East Cleveland. Police also found decomposed human remains in his apartment.
A TV and a bed in the dining room. His front door is boarded up, and investigators tell me when they went inside, they discovered a grisly scene. You can see an unmade bed, boxes.
There was evidence of decomposition fluid in several parts of the apartment building. There were maggots that were attached to the decomposition fluid.
Madison was arrested and charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. If convicted, he could be facing the death penalty.
Say anything to say to Anthony Sowell? We hear that you're a fan of.
At his trial, the defense claimed the murders were spontaneous and in the heat of the moment.
What we have, ladies and gentlemen, is an equal plausible explanation that each one of these individuals was killed with a sudden eruption of violence. He made no effort to bury these bodies and really conceal them, despite the fact that they're in fairly obvious areas.
However, the prosecution argued that Madison's actions were calculative and premeditated.
He
killed them in the same way, at the same place, and in a short time frame. Then he disposed of their bodies. To avoid detection from his crimes, he tied 2 of the victims up with duct tape, placing their legs on each side of their head and bending the body in half.
Eventually, Madison was found guilty of all charges. The victims' family members cried tears of joy. During sentencing, Van Terry, a victim's father, addressed his daughter's killer.
Also, in our hearts, forgive this crime that who's touched our families, taken my child.
He looked straight at Madison. The defendant grinned at him off camera. This is when Terry exploded. Fortunately, Terry was quickly apprehended and taken out of the courtroom. He did not face any additional charges. A short while later, Judge Nancy McDonald addressed the court.
I'm struck by the sheer inhumanity of what one human being can do to not one, but 3 human beings.
She called the murders an act of sheer inhumanity.
You went on to abuse the corpses of these 3 victims. You stripped them from the waist down. You folded them in half.
Finally, it was time for the serial killer to learn his sentence.
Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison, on counts 1, 4, and 7.
Ultimately, Michael Madison received the death penalty. He will live on Ohio's death row, while Van's courtroom leap was truly spectacular. Paul Wade, a 31-year-old man, stands accused of murdering Edward Lamont Smith and Alexis Missy in Louisville, Kentucky. Today, he is appearing at Jefferson County Court before Judge Haney for a preliminary hearing. The proceedings begin on a polite note as defense attorney Aaron Kennedy exchanges cordial greetings with the judge while Wade is escorted into the courtroom.
Now I will say good afternoon. It just turned noon, so good afternoon. Aaron Kennedy Strikesman. I'm standing in for Rob Eggert on behalf of Paul Wade. This is a little bit different. Mr. Eggert is retained on...
However, as Starsman introduces her client, a disturbance begins to build in the gallery. The crowd grows restless, prompting a loud shush from the sheriff's deputy. At the center of the mounting disruption is a woman seated behind the front row at the far right end of the bench. Sensing the escalating unease, the court officers take no chances. A second deputy leaves his post near the judge's bench to approach the woman and issue her a stern warning.
Mr. Eggert is retained on the 2 revocations.
Despite the warning, the woman grows increasingly belligerent, causing further disruption. The judge pauses the proceedings as the deputy climbs over the railings to address her directly, warning that another outburst will result in her removal. However, the judge has already had enough and swiftly orders the woman to leave the courtroom.
Ma'am, you're gonna have to leave the courtroom.
We all family.
Okay, y'all got to not talk. Okay. No talking in the courtroom. That's all. Go ahead.
Peace seems to be restored to the courtroom, and the remainder of the hearing proceeds without incident. However, as Wade is being let out at the end, chaos erupts, disrupting the proceedings entirely. The defendant strides toward the door, flanked by a deputy, but as he passes the gallery, the victim's family members erupt in anger, rising from their seats in a storm of profanity. Chaos ensues as the second deputy rushes toward the gallery, attempting to contain the situation. As tensions escalate, the deputy scales the gate to hold back the enraged crowd swarming around Wade. The camera view shifts to Judge Haney, and while the chaos in the courtroom is no longer visible, her expression speaks volumes. Off camera, Wade is seen running toward the judge's bench, pursued by an enraged gallery member. As Wade escapes through a door to the side of the bench, his pursuer leaps onto the bench and jumps past Judge Haney. Remarkably, despite the pandemonium, Judge Haney remains composed, keeping her seat throughout the ordeal. Eventually, after repeated cries for assistance, one of the deputies takes notice of the situation. The judge, maintaining her composure, motions toward the door to indicate that Wade has fled the courtroom.
He's wrong. He's wrong, bro. He's wrong.
You stay back.
He's wrong.
I know.
The chaos continues to echo from the hallway, where the commotion reaches its peak. Amid the uproar, Wade is once again apprehended by law enforcement.
He's wrong, God.
As a result of the incident, 4 men were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and obstructing governmental operations. In highly emotional cases like this, herd mentality often takes over, fueling chaotic outbursts. However, more often than not, courtroom disruptions are instigated by a single lone wolf, such as Jason Wilson. Jason Wilson is in court to deliver a victim impact statement following the murder of his sister, Misty, after her husband, Tristan Laro, pleaded guilty to the crime. Misty's body was discovered on the bathroom floor of the couple's apartment, having been shot 5 times in the head with a handgun. As Wilson walks through the gate toward the podium, he fixes Lara with a long, hard stare. Wilson begins his statement before Judge G. Michael Westfall, describing the profound impact his sister's death has had on his life. Overcome with emotion, his voice falters as he speaks. Meanwhile, Laro remains unfazed, rocking nonchalantly in his chair. Unable to contain his grief and frustration, Wilson turns directly to Laro, demanding to know why he committed the heinous act, and what happens next is truly unbelievable. As deputies rush to push Wilson back, Laro suddenly moves as though he's preparing to retaliate. A deputy swiftly intervenes, jumping in from behind, wrapping his arms around Laro, and pulling him backwards to the ground. On the other side of the table, Wilson is met with the same rough treatment as deputies fight to restrain both men. On the ground, it becomes clear that Wilson is resisting more forcefully, while Laro lies there, seemingly passive. Let's watch again how quickly the entire incident unfolds. Wilson is eventually subdued and handcuffed. As deputies pull him back to his feet, he apologizes profusely for his outburst. He is then led from the courtroom. Despite Iron County Attorney Scott Garrett stating plans to charge Wilson with disorderly conduct, no charges are filed in the end. Tristan Laro is sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder of Misty. Lashing out at the defendant in retaliation for the murder of a loved one is one of the most common causes of physical altercations in the courtroom. However, on rare occasions, the aggressors end up protesting in favor of the defendant, as seen in the case of Judge Tracy Hunter. As a former judge, Hunter has experienced a massive fall from grace and now finds herself before Judge Patrick Dinkelacker at Hamilton County Common Pleas Court in Cincinnati. She was originally convicted of charges related to abuse of power after leaking confidential documents to her brother, allowing him to keep his job as a corrections officer. She was sentenced to 6 months in jail, but with her extensive knowledge of the legal system, Hunter managed to drag the appeals process out for an astonishing 6 years, staying free while pursuing her case through the courts. However, she has now exhausted all avenues of appeal and is in court today to determine whether the 6-month sentence will finally be imposed. Unlike most defendants, Hunter has developed a cult following, with many reporters believing her conviction to be politically motivated. Crowds of supporters have gathered both inside and outside the courtroom, and tensions are running high. Unfortunately for Hunter, her luck has run out as Judge Dinkelacker orders that she serve the entire sentence, setting in motion an extraordinary chain of events.
1, you pay the cost of these proceedings. Number 2, you are to not violate any laws. Number 3, you are to do 6 months in the Hamilton County Justice Center, credit 1 day. Mr. or Ms. Deputy can take her away.
As the former judge stands, a collective outcry erupts from the gallery. Her supporters begin shouting in protest, voicing their discontent over the ruling. The deputies standing in the center aisle turn to the left, raising their arms in an attempt to calm the crowd. However, as they do so, a woman on the right-hand side of the gallery sees her opportunity and stands, rushing toward Hunter without interruption. As she nears her destination, the deputy closest to the podium spots her and frantically moves to stop her. The rising tension suddenly boils over. As one of the deputies moves to lead Hunter from the courtroom, she begins to struggle before going limp. By now, the gallery is in an uproar, and supporters cry out, "No justice!" The judge-turned-felon is then dragged unceremoniously from the courtroom. The woman who attempted to approach Hunter is handcuffed and led out of the courtroom by officers. The remainder of Hunter's supporters are still incensed as they exit, rallying outside the courthouse, chanting and marching in protest. Despite the chaos, Hunter ultimately serves just 3 months of her sentence before being released. While her support from the public was strong and the courtroom drama may have been out of line, the ultimate intention of her supporters was seen as morally upstanding. However, as we see in the next case, this isn't always the case. At the Marion County Judicial Center in Florida, Travis Davis has just been found guilty of first-degree murder, alongside co-defendants Brandon Banks, Kelvin Grimmage, and Kella Richardson. The 4 men are facing life in prison for shooting homeowner Courtney London during a home robbery in Ocala. Tensions are running high after the delivery of the verdict, and due to the known volatile nature of the defendants, extra deputies have been drafted in to maintain control in the courtroom. As the judge proceeds with the hearing, he asks the prosecutor if they can move forward with sentencing.
Any legal reason we shouldn't proceed with sentencing today?
Everything seems to be proceeding normally in the courtroom, but unbeknownst to everyone, things are about to take a shocking turn. Watch closely as Davis reacts just before the judge delivers the sentence. A deputy behind him attempts to cuff him, but Davis quickly yanks his hand away. Sensing the danger, the deputy immediately grabs Davis from behind, but that's when the situation escalates. A second deputy rushes toward co-defendant Grimmage to cuff him. As the deputy leans over the table, Grimmage pulls back. Davis uses his body weight to throw himself onto the table in front of him, while Grimmage joins in, grappling with the deputy and throwing punches. The chaos continues as both men are eventually dragged to the ground. Meanwhile, Davis is wrestled to the ground but manages to get back up, swinging his fists wildly as he lashes out at the deputies and even at his own defense attorney, who eventually escapes around the side of the table. With the courtroom in chaos, the deputy at the back steps in and unleashes his taser on Davis, causing him to fall to the ground. Grimmage and Banks are also tased, though Banks hasn't joined in the chaos. Luckily for Richardson, he had already been handcuffed and was rushed to the side of the courtroom when the melee erupted. The public in the gallery are up in arms, shouting and reacting to the chaos unfolding in the courtroom. A deputy orders them to leave, but many are reluctant to go, clearly upset by the violent disruption. The tension in the courtroom escalates as the deputies work to restore order and remove the unruly onlookers. The room is eventually cleared, and the deputies regain control, bringing Davis and Grimmage into the center of the courtroom. Although they ultimately face no charges related to the brawl, all 4 defendants in the Davis case are sentenced to life without parole for the murder. In such cases, the chaos in the courtroom has no bearing on the verdict or sentence. However, in the case of Carl Williams, the outcome of his trial was dramatically altered after a courtroom incident. Williams is on trial in DeKalb County for shooting and killing his girlfriend, Donana Jackson. He claims the gun went off accidentally while he was showing it to her. In the courtroom, after closing arguments, the jury exits and Williams stays behind to speak with his lawyer. The mood is calm until suddenly, a person from the public gallery rushes up to the defense table and attacks Williams. A brawl ensues, with fists flying as family members of Donana Jackson join in, swarming Williams. His defense attorney is caught in the chaos, pushed and pulled. Deputies rush in to separate the groups, arresting the individual who instigated the incident. Despite the warning, the woman grows increasingly belligerent, causing further disruption. The judge pauses the proceedings as the deputy climbs over the railings to address her directly, warning that another outburst will result in her removal. However, the judge has already had enough and swiftly orders the woman to leave the courtroom. The jury, who were in an adjoining room, hear the entire commotion, and as a result, a mistrial is granted to Williams. No retrial has been brought before the courts to date. The attack on Williams was a physical one, designed to cause as much damage as possible in a short amount of time.